Professor Yossi Mekelberg joins me now. Professor, really good to have you on the program this evening. Now, firstly, Iran is saying that there won't be any major retaliation unless Israel strikes its oil or nuclear infrastructure. What does this tell us about where Tehran sits in this war that's ravaging Gaza and Lebanon and keeping Israel on high alert?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I think this is kind of part of the good news, is that both sides would like to de-escalate the situation as we see that, because there is a real danger in this kind of engagement between two countries that the tit-for-tat, the vicious cycle, will continue for quite a while. And at a certain point, one forgets what was the retaliation for what and how. I think at this point, because of the relatively restrained reaction or retaliation by Israel that Iran was able to dismiss, it enables Tehran to not completely declare that it won't retaliate, but says that it would consider whether it wants to retaliate, how, and at what time.
And do you think there's also pressure coming from Israel's allies to say, look, just don't go there?
There's been or had been pressure before this attack. Bear in mind, Iran's launch of 180 ballistic missiles back at 1st of October it took quite a long time between this and Israel retaliation, almost 3 weeks. Part of it has also to do with the Jewish high holidays that took place in between. So the pressure was attacking the nuclear facilities would have constituted a declaration of war, an all-out war. It's very similar, oil and gas facilities, installation, and beyond that, affecting the prices or energy prices a week before election in the United States, which is never a good idea. And also affect other oil producers and gas producers in the Middle East. So what's left is targeting the sources of the attack on Israel, degrading also the air defense system, which sending also a signal to Tehran. You know, not only we attacked certain military target that, for instance, manufacture missiles, we also degraded your air defense system. And if you attack us, it will be relatively easier for us to attack again because your defense system is not as operational as they were before.
In the meantime, there have been more Israeli strikes into Gaza, this time killing dozens of people there. Now we're hearing from the Egyptian leader, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. He's calling for a 2-day ceasefire to allow for an exchange of hostages for prisoners. Is that likely to happen?
I doubt it, but right now there are negotiations in Qatar, in Doha. The head of the Mossad is in Doha, and I understand that he extended his stay. So maybe there is some mini momentum of negotiation. Bear in mind that most of the Hamas leadership, including Yahya Sinwar, has been eliminated. So you need to find also who you negotiate at this point, any ceasefire. The question is, a very short ceasefire will allow more humanitarian aid, letting some of the hostages, release of prisoners, but at the same time, most importantly, is to create a new momentum, to change the language with the one of continuing war into talking about ceasefire, going back to discuss the release of hostages in return to prisoners, but also maybe, just maybe, looking into the day after and plans to see how you reestablish security for everyone in Gaza, but also that Gaza is going to be governed by Palestinians.
And can we expect Egypt as well to do more as far as the humanitarian crisis is concerned in Gaza?
I think we can expect everyone to do more, including Egypt. But you need to create the conditions within Gaza. There are hundreds and hundreds of trucks waiting on the border between Egypt and Gaza, waiting to enter. The question is the distribution. This kind of humanitarian aid, in what hands it ends. because it's not always in the end of either the UN, UNRWA organization, or in the end of other humanitarian organization. Sometimes it's in the end of Hamas, or in the end of some of the Palestinian clans, and then it basically goes to the black market. That's how awful is the situation there. So yes, there is need for allowing more trucks to enter, but also ensuring that it ends in helping the right people.
And Benjamin Netanyahu, he's been accused at home of obstructing efforts at a truce. Has he obstructed efforts in your view?
I think there's quite a mounting evidence of that, not only now, but since there was a deal on the table in February, in July, and many of us suspect that it has to do with two things. A is political survival, but also with his corruption trial. In December of this year, he's supposed to give for the first time evidence. It's the long saga of his corruption trial, and only if the war continues, he will have an excuse to ask the court to say, I can't do both, running a war and give evidence in a corruption trial. I'm not prepared. So at the same time, he is also in the hands of the far right, and the far right is pushing for almost permanent presence in Gaza, and even building settlements there. So this is part of the unfortunate calculus of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Okay, Professor Yossi Mekelberg, really good to get your analysis. Thanks very much.
Thank you.